Hey, good evening, everybody. My name is James Rohde, and I'm the Artistic Director for the Orlando Gay Chorus.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Christopher Cuevas, and I'm the Executive Director of Q Latinx.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Daniel J. Downer, and I'm the Executive Director of the Bros and Combo Initiative.
We'd like to welcome everybody here tonight for the third annual diversity concert that Orlando Gay Chorus usually holds. This year is especially exciting because we have all of our partner organizations. I'd also like to say welcome and hello on behalf of Christopher Green, who is the Artistic Director for Central Florida Sounds of Freedom and couldn't be with us here tonight because he's in the middle of a rehearsal.
This event is being hosted by the Orlando Gay Chorus, Central Florida Sounds of Freedom Band and Color Guard, Q Latinx, and the Rose and Combo Initiative. And we have extra special thanks to our sponsors, Trulieve and Watermark Media. This event is being put on as part of the Orlando's Come Out with Pride celebration. So, tune in for some more information later on this evening about our friends at Come Out with Pride.
We hope you enjoy this wonderful diversity concert. So sit back, relax, and I am going to toss the mic over to Jasmine Rogers, founder of Folding Chair Consulting.
Good evening, everyone. A few minutes is certainly not enough time to describe all of the contributions of this powerful ancestor, but I hope I do her some justice in this testimony of her life. A self-described Black lesbian, mother, warrior, poet, Audre Lorde lived her life and her art at the intersection of race, gender, sexuality, and an undying quest towards liberation. She said, "My poetry comes from the intersection of me and my worlds." A native New Yorker and the child of West Indian immigrants, Audre Lorde was dedicated to the social justice that did not leave her Blackness or queer people behind. Through her academic career and personal life, she knew it was her duty to speak the truth as I see it and share not just my triumphs, not just the things that feel good, but the pain, the intense, often unmitigating pain. An educator, brilliant orator, creator, Audre Lorde co-founded the Kitchen Table Women of Color Press, a literary home for Black feminist writers. From Queen Mother Lorde, we learned the master's tools will not dismantle the master's house. We learned authenticity as Black queer women. We learned that all of our identities can and must occupy the same space. We learned to be untamed, to be powerful and dangerous. We learned to just be. Through transformation, love, rage, community, and poetry, we have the framework, a legacy to care for ourselves and care for others. Because after all, in the words of the Lord, we are deliberate and afraid of nothing.
I know thee well, she is walking by me, walking for equality, she is walking by me.
Talk about a great trailblazer, a great icon,
lesbian,
in music and
mother, warrior, poet. These were the words used by Audre Lorde to describe herself. An acclaimed poet, Lorde dedicated her talent and her life to rooting out injustice, to combat the forces of classism, sexism, racism, and homophobia. As a professor, Lorde contributed to advancements in feminism and queer theory. She was at the forefront of exploring intersectionality, understanding how our various identities of race, sexuality, gender can combine in different ways and transform how we walk through the world. Fiercely, Lorde once said, "Women are powerful and dangerous." fearlessly, she held the mirror up to her own community of feminists and forced many to reevaluate their own privilege and unconscious biases. When I dare to be powerful, Lord said, to use my strength in the service of my vision, then it becomes less and less important whether I'm afraid. During the women's liberation movement of the 70s and 80s, we often sang, Susan B. Anthony is walking by me. This year, as we celebrate the centennial of a woman's right to vote, let us also remember our queer women, our Black women, our women of color, and the countless others who also walked by us and for us. This year, let us also proudly sing Audre Lorde is walking with me.
She is walking by me.
Hi, I'm here to talk about a great trailblazer and icon in the disco community, queer artist Sylvester. He was known as a drag impersonator, a female impersonator, and beyond. He inspires me every day. Every time I listen to his music, you make me feel mighty real. And with him in the background of 2 Tons of Fun and the Weather Girls, who are they known as now. And it inspires me to live my life unapologetically. It inspires me to be Black, fearless, and queer and gay, and however I want to express myself from day to day. I feel like I have the right and clearance, not only from Sylvester, but many other trailblazers and icons in music, in the arts, activism. And it drives me to be more of an activist for others who feel like they can't stand up for themselves and feel like they don't have the right to be who they feel they are authentically, matter how they dress, how they talk, how they sing, how they love, and who they love. So this is a great way to honor Sylvester, and by just living your best life and staying true to you. And that's all I can say about Sylvester. Thank you.
When we're out there dancing on the floor, darling, and I feel like I need some more, and I feel your body close to mine, and I
acceptance, support, love. The great disco legend Sylvester is a testament to the greatness queer kids can achieve when they are afforded those gifts from the beginning. Raised by his grandmother and mother, themselves ostentatious women of flair and style, Sylvester had both the freedom and the example to construct an identity that would launch him to superstardom. Buoyed by this support, Sylvester struck out on his own at the tender age of 15. By 1970, he had found a home in San Francisco's legendary neighborhood, the Castro. Sylvester's alchemical mixture of androgyny coupled with the unique energy and style of Black churches produced an act like no other. Sylvester's sophomore album would produce his greatest hits, Dance, Disco Heat, and You Make Me Feel Mighty Real.
You make me feel mighty real.
Mainstream success never drew Sylvester away from his home and his people. He never lost touch with the gay community and continued to perform at gay pride events throughout his career. However, no amount of success could spare him from the plague decimating his beloved community. On December 16, 1988, Sylvester passed away from AIDS-related illness at the age of 41. In 2005, American scholar Joshua Gamson wrote in his biography of Sylvester, Sylvester rode his marginality right into the mainstream. A star, not despite the boundaries of race, gender, and sexuality he eagerly crossed, but because of them. Sylvester stands forever as a testament to what we can achieve when we live in our truth proudly, fiercely, and authentically.
I feel real, I feel real, I feel real. feel real.
Born in Hong Kong and raised in the United States, Cecilia Chung has walked the painful and difficult road so many of our trans brothers and sisters continue to tread to this day. In 1992, Chung began her transition, and like far too many transgender people, Chung was disowned by her family. Jobless and experiencing homelessness, Chung medicated to numb the loss with drugs and turned to sex work to survive. That year, Chung was diagnosed with HIV. After 3 years on the streets, a stab wound received during a sexual assault landed her in the hospital. It was then, by her bedside, that she reconciled with her family. This was a moment her life began to pivot. In 1998, Chung, now living as her authentic and fearless self, allowed her activism to take shape. As a member of the San Francisco Health Commission, she successfully compelled the city in 2013 to provide free gender affirmation surgery to uninsured transgender individuals. Our bodies are beautiful. Our choices are valid. Cecilia's life teaches us that owning those two truths can give us the power to be the change we wish to see in the world.
Good evening. My name is Chevalier Lovett. My pronouns are he, him, or they, them. I serve as the Senior Vice President and Managing Director of Organized Florida, and I also proudly serve on the board of Opera Orlando and as their host for the Representation Matters series. I just want to first say that I am grateful to be in this space to celebrate Pride here in Orlando and in Central Florida, but to also celebrate and talk about a pioneer within the history of our movement by Rustin. As a Black queer member of the LGBTQ plus community, he really became a catalyst for what it meant to be a part of the activism community. In fact, he was a leader in the civil rights movement and marched right alongside Dr. King. In fact, he was one of the main architects and pioneers for standing up for Black lives on the March of Washington. And that meant a lot for what we can do today. One of the things that particularly sits with me about Rustin is that as a queer gay man, he was not able to be in the front lines a lot. In fact, he had to sit behind and lead from behind. And that what actually sits with me the most. One being someone who believes in nonviolence activism, as Rustin did, and having to be behind the scenes myself in several capacities and roles to understand what it means to be a strategist to ensure that there is equity within our community for LGBTQ plus folks, particularly folks of color. To have his spirit around and to be able to speak about him in this way, I am here because of what he did back then. We are here because of a lot of the strategies that he used back then. And so as we celebrate Pride this month, let us uplift the spirit of Rustin, who is a very well-respected person throughout our history. In fact, President Obama gave him a Presidential Medal of Freedom, one of the highest honors in our country, because of his sacrifice. And so, happy Pride, Orlando, and let's celebrate.
Oh, the one thing we did right was the day we started to fight. Keep your eyes on the prize, hold on.
One of the most iconic images of the civil rights movement came in August of 1963. There on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial during the centennial of the signing of the Emancipation Proclamation, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. told that crowd of 200,000 people gathered for the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom his dream. We remember his speech, we remember the crowds, we remember the message, but do we remember the man who made it all possible? The genius behind the watershed moment in the history of our civil rights was a gay ex-communist named Bayard Rustin. It was Rustin who, having traveled to India after Gandhi's death, taught Dr. King about the Indian leaders' principles of nonviolent civil disobedience. Rustin never hid his political ideology or his sexual orientation, and for it, he was relegated to the shadows. In 1953, he had been arrested for lewd conduct with 2 white men. From that day forward, he was consigned to a closet he didn't choose. But he knew that he was serving a greater cause and that the liberation of Black Americans was more important than the receiving credit he rightfully deserved, for which ultimately led to the passage of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. In the 1980s, during the darkest days of the AIDS crisis, Rustin turned his activism toward advancing the rights of his LGBTQ community. Rustin died in 1987, but in 2013, President Barack Obama, a man whose presidency would not have been possible if not for the work of Bayard Rustin, awarded him the Presidential Medal of Freedom in commemoration of his work for the Black and LGBTQ communities. Of Bayard Rustin, President Obama said, "Bayard Rustin was an unyielding activist for civil rights, dignity, and equality for all. An advisor to the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., he promoted nonviolent resistance, participated in one of the first freedom rides, organized the 1963 March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom, and fought tirelessly for marginalized communities at home and abroad." As an openly gay African American, Mr. Rustin stood at the intersection of several of the fights for equal rights.
Hold on, hold on.
Who was Sylvia Rivera? A legend, a trailblazer, an icon. Before gay rights, before Stonewall, Rivera was involved in the Black liberation movement, the peace movement. The blood of a revolutionary ran through her veins. A lion-hearted leader who carried our movement on her shoulders, Rivera made it possible for people like you and me to live, love, and embody joy. Today, decades after Rivera fought for LGBTQIA+ rights, she is finally getting her roses for her invaluable contributions to social justice. In her honor, in her memory, and in her legacy, let us keep the fight and never stop until we are all free.
Un disturbio es el lenguaje de los no escuchados. Con esas palabras, Martin Luther King Jr. iluminó las consecuencias de la opresión sin recurso. Todas las personas merecen que su voz sea escuchada y a veces hay que hacer que te escuchen. En julio de 1969, los clientes de Stonewall Inn se hicieron oír. Liderados por Sylvia Rivera y Marsha P. Johnson, mujeres transgénero de color que dedicaron sus vidas a nuestra liberación. Los clientes lucharon contra una redada policial, el tipo de redada diseñada para infundir miedo y terror en nuestra gente. Silvia era una nativa de Nueva York de ascendencia puertorriqueña. Luchó no solo por los derechos de sus hermanos LGBTQ, sino que marchó por la justicia racial con los Young Lords y las Panteras Negras. Rivera fue una mujer que luchó para asegurar que todos nosotros, trans y cis, latinos, negros o blancos, pudiéramos vivir libre y abiertamente. Su trabajo para la comunidad transgénero fue pionero e innovador, ya que mucho de lo que ahora entendemos sobre la experiencia transgénero estaba todavía en sus primeras etapas. Más de 50 han pasado desde esa fatídica noche de junio. Liderados por Rivera, Johnson y otras personas transgénero, negras y latinx, personas LGBTQ, irrumpieron en las calles exigiendo igualdad y libertad sexual, haciendo saber al mundo que amor es amor.
Tonight has been a night of celebration. Yes, we have fought. Yes, we have struggled. And yes, we still have miles to go before we sleep. But tonight, we pause to uplift those who have brought us this far. We uplift those whose names have sometimes been forgotten or overlooked. Queer people of color have been at the forefront of progressive change from the very beginning, be it the civil rights movement of the 1950s, the women's liberation movement of the 1970s, the gay rights movement of the late 60s, or the Black Lives Matter movement of today. Queer people of color were there. Why? Because queerness knows no gender, no race, no creed, no ethnicity. Rather, it both transcends and binds all other identities together. We are queer and Black, queer and women, queer and Muslim or Catholic or Jewish. Civil rights are queer rights. Women's rights are queer rights. In this, we see the beauty and power of our queer identities. We hope that these incredible figures we have presented to you tonight will inspire you to walk a little taller, to speak a little louder, and to be proud of the rich diversity that is the true strength of our queer community. Let these luminous leaders no longer be relegated to the shadows, but take their rightful place in the pantheon of ancestors who give us our power, our wisdom, our courage, and our unwavering faith that indeed we shall overcome. We thank you so much for joining us tonight on behalf of our partners and sponsors. And now we ask you to stick around for our panel discussion coming up next.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. My name is Tatiana Quiroga. I'm a board member for Come Out with Pride and the director of the Community Outreach and Inclusion. So we are celebrating Pride Week. Pride is not canceled. We're so excited to still be able to celebrate as a community, as we should, especially in these times and this year. So what's going on this weekend? If you haven't heard yet, we've got Pride in the streets. That's going to kick off this Saturday at noon. It's going to be a processional going through all the different neighborhoods in Orlando. Come out, find a spot. You're welcome to, gather with those who are your, quarantining with or social distance. We ask everyone to wear their masks and just come and see the processional of people that, you know, are participating. Then after that, Saturday night, we've got Pride in the House, our virtual extravaganza. And that's going to be at 8 o'clock. And in the middle of all that, we've got a whole bunch of programming, even Kids Fringe, and we've got a pre-show. So Saturday is going to be so full of pride that I'm just simply so excited. So for more details, to find out the route, get you know, exactly, you know, get more updates on what's going on, please go to comeoutwithpride.com. And we are just so excited to have all this going on. So with that being said, on a little bit more of a serious note, as excited as we are about Pride, we also want you to know that Pride is not just a party. Come Out with Pride. We are committed and very dedicated to making sure that we are highlighting marginalized communities of color and marginalized communities within the LGBTQ IA community, and that we are very much committed to racial justice and anti-racism work. So that is something that we hold near and dear. So that's why, you know, we're so honored to be part of this panel tonight. So that being said, speaking of our panel, first of all, I want to say thank you to Orlando Gay Chorus, Sounds of Freedom Band and Color Guard, Q Latinx, and Bros in Convo Initiative for hosting this event tonight. It has just been so powerful to just have the reminders about our history, and particularly our history for the movement that has been going on for quite some time. So it was very moving to hear all that, and it, you know, just being able to be aware of our history too is huge. That being said too, we want to say thank you to our sponsors for thank you Trulieve, Watermark, Come Out with Pride. So that, let's go ahead and get our panel started. So as you guys know, we're celebrating LGBTQ diversity. We're highlighting LGBTQ plus voices that are often overlooked, and discussing several factors such as gender, race, sexuality that are sometimes challenged by systematic inequality and manifest itself in bias and racism and sexism. So just kind of jumping into that, I see that we've got two of our panelists with us tonight, and we're excited. Thank you so much for being here. First off, we've got Patrick A. Jackson. Thank you, Patrick, for joining us. Patrick is an actor, teaching artist, and creative based out of St. Pete, and is an alumni of Morehouse College. He is an adult education associate with American Stage Company and has appeared on stages all across Tampa Bay and Central Florida. Outside of the theater, Patrick provides creative support and virtual production services for nonprofits with his company, Live 5 Creation, and hosts the Black Hand Side, a cultural podcast. So welcome, Patrick.
Thank you so much, Tatiana, and thank you to all the organizations hosting this event. It's such a pleasure to be on the panel tonight.
Thank you. And then we've got Brandon Martin. And so Brandon is an Orlando area actor, musician, composer. He's very busy, who has performed in Walt Disney as well as other orchestras and theater companies. For the last 3 years, Brandon has been a member of the board for Orlando Gay Chorus and has volunteered as the representative for One Orlando Alliance. In the last few months, Brandon with a few musician friends has gotten the opportunity to perform an hour-long virtual show, A Voice of Justice, which uses song to take the audience through the Black American experience. Lastly, Brandon's last project, is a series called Black and Queer, which highlights Black LGBTQ history, and it is available on his Instagram feed at Brandon Martin Music.
Thanks, Tatiana. Glad to be here.
Well, wonderful. Well, thank you both so much for taking the time, and let's totally dive into it. Do want to note that respecting time, speaking of time, we are going to go ahead and use questions that have been submitted beforehand. So making sure we're clear on that. So first question, and we'll start with you, Patrick, and then move on to Brandon. So for some, being an artist means being able to communicate your mental state and using arts in that form, right? So given the current political and social climate around the movement for racial equality, how are you as an artist channeling this in your work?
That's a great question. Thank you, Tatiana. I did want to point out Catherine, the other panelist, is actually here. I didn't want her to miss her introduction.
Oh, so sorry, Catherine. I completely didn't see you there. Let me go back. Catherine, thank you so much for being able to join us. So Catherine identifies as a queer first-generation Jamaican American woman. 6 years ago, she found her voice through art of spoken word, and since then performed in local open mics in the Orlando area, and has performed for organizations such as Zebra Coalition, Peer Support Space, and Safe House. She hopes to inspire others through speaking their truth in form of personal liberation. Thank you, Catherine.
Thank you so much for welcoming me here. This is an honor and a gift, and I'm excited to be with other creatives and talk about how we liberate each other and the community through our work.
Wonderful. So going back, let's see if we restating the first question, and if Patrick, you still want to be the first one to jump in.
Sure.
So, being in the current climate that we are right now with, this huge movement for racial equity, how as an artist have you been able to, channel this moment?
I love that question. The first thing I think about when I think about energy and the momentum that's kind of been reignited after the unfortunate passing of Ahmaud Arbery and George Floyd and Breonna Taylor. I think about a Maya Angelou quote, and I'm going to paraphrase it, but she says, you should be angry, you must not be bitter. Bitterness is like a cancer, it does nothing to the host. And basically the essential part of the quote that keeps me moving forward is that you have to keep on talking it. And so when all these situations occurred in late May, June, I had a unique opportunity at my theater, being the only staff member of color, to use my experiences to continue conversation. So I led an African American theater and legacy course, and through the summer, we had an overview of different parts of African American theater history, from the origins of stereotypes and caricatures to all the way through now. Leading musicals like A Strange Loop, and the contributions that not only Black artists but Black queer artists are making, and I'm also doing that with my own podcast that actually ironically launched in July. I had planned it anyway to happen in July, but it just happened to fall around everything that was happening. Divine order, I will accept that. And then finally, I have been fortunate to partner with other organizations. There is an improv company that started in the midst of the quarantine called Socially Distant Improv, and we host a weekly Facebook Live panel that is titled Anti-Racism for Comedy Folks. So we specifically talk about anti-racism practices in the comedy arena, and we know in comedy, Black and queer people are nothing but caricature, and so we have constant conversation about how to make those spaces safe and inclusive for not just Black and queer people, but everyone.
Thank you, Patrick. And I really like the point that you brought up of making sure that we're continuing these conversations, and that it's basically not like a trendy hashtag, and that we're still keeping it, in line, and making sure that we're keeping true to the movement, and really, to me, making sure that we're keeping accountability, because part of that is making sure that we're continuing those conversations. So thank you. Brandon, would you like to jump in?
Sure. So I think what I've done over the past few months has been a mix. As an artist, as a performing artist, what I've had the pleasure of doing is collaborating with Orlando area performers. I know we got to do some virtual videos. One that comes to mind is Till We Reach That Day from Ragtime that we got to put together, which was fantastic. So shout out to Desiree for doing that. And another one that I got to do with, as you mentioned, Tatiana, in the intro, a friend of mine, Kevin Wu, who we've gotten to work together on other projects, and we recorded a Make Them Hear You rendition, which kind of spun into the show that we do together, A Voice of Justice. And I'm so glad to get to do that show. I learned a lot, and it is my hope that the people that get to see that show learn from it as well. But it's been a mix of that, as well as, like you said, I've been gotten to be involved with the Orlando Gay Chorus and kind of, being involved in other volunteer efforts throughout these last few months as well. So, yeah.
So, Brandy, I'm curious. You said that you learned something from one of the shows. Interested to hear what that is.
I mean, I guess you could say, on the one hand, I'll put it this way: we all have different experiences. So on the one hand, obviously, being in my skin, I definitely have certain experiences, but we all have different experiences. There's no monolith of the Black community, and like I'm, coming from a Caribbean background, so there are just different experiences that I've had. Grenada, shout out. But so yeah, so just learning from different Black experiences, Black American experiences that I did not grow up with. So that's kind of what I meant. Yes.
Awesome. Catherine?
Sure. So just to restate the question, it's how has our work evolved, or what have we been doing given the current state of everything going on? Okay. So yeah, I got a lot just from what my fellow panelists said. I really relate to the speaking and using your voice as a form of advocacy, and also recognizing that Black people are unique and we're not a monolith, and that's something that I try to honor in myself and with others around me. But essentially, I did take a good time to rest and also to really invest in my joy during this time. So it wasn't so much about working, being productive. It was about filling myself up. And sometimes my work in poetry and spoken word helps with that. And other times it really is me just needing to like take a chill pill, slow down. And I think through doing that, others kind of like see that example and see that model and are like, okay, I can like kind of relax too. But the biggest thing really is the self-advocacy, and that's what I learned so much through spoken word. So currently I'm working with a group of about 15 youth, and teaching them how to be sexual health advocates for themselves and others. But there's so many different mediums to do that, and spoken word is like one of the biggest mediums that has worked for me. So we just had a meeting the other day where we were kind of like exploring like what are the things that they have, what have been their worst and best experiences in life, and what lessons have they learned. And so I think like this time, especially like when I saw George Floyd's funeral, it was like such a sad time. But when I saw that funeral, it was like, man, like something so terrible, something so gruesome can be like used as a way to like motivate and immortalize people. So that's really what I think I've been doing with spoken word, using it as a form of advocacy for myself, but also empowering others to find their voice through it. And if it's not through spoken word, finding some other type of medium. But your voice is something, it's a power that really no one can take away from you, at least in a legal way. So yeah.
So I love it because what I hear from all three of you is really kind of taking these moments these last couple months, and obviously all the unfortunate things that have happened, but then really turning them and using them as an advocacy tool, an empowerment, and creating something from that, right? And then also too, Catherine, I love the part that you brought up about the self-care, because we know that where it was wonderful that we saw this this huge interest suddenly, because we know that the systematic racism has obviously been happening for years. This is not anything new to a person of color. But now it's a hashtag. So now it's gotten, major corporations even saying it. So now it's the thing. So it was, speaking as a Latina, it was nice to hear that suddenly there was this spark, right? That we're going to move this movement forward. But at the same time, there was also this exhaustion that came with it. And so, Catherine, I love the part that you talked about the self-care that you realized that you were needing to do. If there was a little bit more that you wanted to share about that, or if Patrick or Martin, you kind of felt that, self-care kind of, coming to the surface for you too.
I'll give them an opportunity to speak if they connected to it on any level.
Well, I can definitely acknowledge that there were days where I was exhausted. Yes. Exhausted, frustrated, just needed the day for myself. So I can definitely attest to that. I'm sure most people of color could go living through all of the last summer. Yeah.
There's something so interesting about this summer specifically, because this isn't the first time we've dealt with these experiences. But the way I processed it this time was different. And I love what Catherine said about filling herself up. A part of my spiritual practice is meditation and stillness and silence and kind of manifesting prosperity. But a part of that prosperity consciousness is from other, not from my cup. And in this experience, I found that I was giving from not just my saucer, but my cup. And so in this time to find self-care, I really had to step back and reevaluate how I was advocating and how I was protesting. Mm-hmm. I'm 32 now. 10 years ago when things were starting and stuff with Trayvon Martin and all this stuff, I was out in the streets hard. But that was also taking so much out of me emotionally, not just like energy wise, but just emotionally. I could not function. And so I really had to be intentional about choosing when to go out in the streets this time and protest, mm-hmm. when to use my gifts and talents as an artist to protest, and when to just sit back, pray, meditate on it, hold that consciousness, because that is the fight too. And just have a simple conversation.
Mm. Wonderful. So moving on to our next question, obviously not having to tell you, you all, because you are, obviously artists, but, we know that there's an unspoken truth and in the performing arts, and that there's a long secret, and really knowing that there's a lack of diversity and visibility in the performance industry when it comes to everything from body shape to race to gender. And we know that there's a huge underrepresentation. So what would be some recommendations that you all would have for curators or artistic directors who are genuinely and really meaningfully trying to incorporate more diversity and equity? Catherine, do you want to go first?
Sure. The first word that pops into my mind is accountability, because on their own, there's no way that they can spot out what are my biases, what are my blind spots, even if I want to do something, what are my colleagues going to say, or who's going to who from the chain of command is going to come here and be hell no, shoot this idea down. So having some form of accountability, and I think one of the people that put this together, Christopher Cuevas, it was part of making in Orlando at least a anti-racist evaluation scoring card. So something like that could be given and mandated, and that could be like, you know, so it's like, it's not just like, okay, I'm going to make these decisions here and there, but no, like I have this thing that I'm going to like chart down, like what are my decisions? Where is my budget going? How many people of color, queer people, disabled are like, am I working with? And like, then I have to answer to someone if I fall short in that area.
Mm-hmm. For sure. And that would be amazing, because that would be changing the whole entire system, right? So that would be wild. Brandon?
Yeah, as a creator, thing that comes to mind is internally knowing and feeling that what you have to say is valuable, and knowing that each one of us has something that inside of us that needs to be heard. Mm-hmm. So that'd be the main thing I'd say.
Okay, thank you. Patrick?
I love that, the anti-racism report card. I just think that is, I love that. I would love to bring that to my organization. I'm going to hit Crystal.
Yeah.
The thing I think about initially, right when everything started happening in June, a lot of Black and brown artists got together that work regionally and in Broadway and all that. They got together and they created a list of demands. And it's gone around and it's accessible at We See You White American Theater, right? So they made the statement, and then shortly after that statement came out, they created a list of demands, and they are actionable things that theater makers, that producers, that creative companies can just look at. We know everything is not going to happen overnight, but the list of demands is really, really thorough. And even myself, as a Black, queer identifying man, I was just like, wow, there were some things on that list that I wasn't even thinking about. Shortening a tech rehearsal, didn't think about that. Not having a tech rehearsal on a Saturday or a Sunday because, a lot of cultural communities have religious services on those days. I wasn't even thinking about that. So there are resources already out there. That's a great document. And the only other suggestion I can think of is listening, seeking to understand rather than seeking to be understood, and just giving yourself grace, because this is a process. It took us 300 years in slavery. So right. It's cool. I get it. We're working.
Right. And Patrick, I like that you say that you shared this an incredible resource that is out there and is so detailed, and that even as a person of color, you learned something from it, which, again, as people of color, we're not always experts in this. It's just our life. We're experts in our own experience, and how we move through how we navigate through our life. But, along this thread, I was, kind of wondering, as artists, was it challenging at all? Were you ever approached by, the larger system, by, leadership and the performing arts world to ask you, what should we do now?
That has happened. And I think it's a mix of, realizing you should not have all the answers and it's not your full responsibility. And realizing that that it needs to be an effort that it shouldn't be on our shoulders necessarily.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've been asked, when this stuff happened, my producing artistic director, she called me, not just as oh, I know you're the only Black person, but she genuinely wanted to just check in on me. And I was honest with her. I said, I'm living multiple truths. I want to still do my work, but I am exhausted. I'm happy to, have conversation, but please don't ask me to be the leader. I would love to be in the group, but I don't desire to lead. And she respected that. And we've been moving forward with things, but that's what I hope leaders can understand, that no Black or brown person has all the answers. Because we, like you said, Tatiana, we have various experiences. But hopefully you will listen to all of the experiences that you can and just do what you can.
Right.
Yeah, I could speak in the spoken word community. In general, I think we're made up of people that are pretty marginalized, misfits, etc. So I think like on our own, we kind of like have some of the tools and we kind of get each other. But I will say, like in my personal life, in my recovery communities, and in my job as a sexual health educator, I have been asked certain things, and it always is an awkward thing. I'm glad that you both validated the whole like I don't have all the answers, and I'm not the representative for all Black people everywhere, and so yeah, it's hard, and so I think just like being in community with other people that like get that, and you know, you're not the only one who's getting those questions, and being able to like advocate for yourself, like I hear that you both are doing, and be like, you know, listen, I could help to the capacity of which I could help, but I'm also exhausted and I'm getting this from all angles. Like you're not the only white person that's asking me how I'm doing.
Okay.
Right. And so, and what I hear from that is, again, that like self-care component of, you know, that is so important. And also too, of realizing that, you know, it doesn't fall all on our shoulder, and that it's got to be shared labor, you know, and sometimes, you know, letting go a little bit of that and allowing for somebody else to take the labor, you know, it's huge. And it's a lesson, you know, especially if, like you said, we are held as representatives. Like suddenly we know everything. We're supposed to speak for this entire race and know all the answers and be an expert on it completely. So being able to let go of that and having those boundaries and self-care. So our next question, knowing that there's lots of myths that happen in the performing arts world about, you know, trying to incorporate and trying to, you know, engage the Black and other, you know, brown communities, you know, how would you guys challenge those misconceptions, and, you know, what happens when you call that system out? Patrick?
The first thing I think about is Dominique Morisseau has a list of playwrights' requests or rules that she includes with all of her plays. And one of the lines in there that it says, for some of us, coming to see this play is a spiritual experience. You may hear some amens and ahas and, you know, other just vocalizations. Be okay with that and enjoy the ride. And that is, when I think about Black and brown culture, you know, that is us in a nutshell. Like we express loudly, not just because we're angry, but because we love something. And in the Eurocentric kind of view of the arts, it's very prim and proper. I sit in my place and, you know, I applaud, and that's it. But when somebody's on stage, whether they're sharing a spoken word piece or if somebody's singing or singing, right? You know, I want to scream. I want to yes. I want, you know, I want to let them know that they are entertaining me. And we have to call that out. You know, if a white person is looking at me weird, I will just turn and say, it's a great performance. You should relax, you know, just call it out. And there's more conversations happening about that now. I'm glad. I think changing performance spaces can also help with that conversation. So not a traditional theater, using unconventional spaces for performances, performing outside, going to those communities instead of expecting them to come to those theaters can also reduce some of that stigma.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. Thank you. Brandon?
I would say within my space, there's a big conversation happening, and I don't know if this gets to the question, but a conversation happening as far as programming and composers and whose voices are heard in the choral music realm, classical music realm. There just aren't a lot of Black voices. Like that's just kind of not a thing. So the conversation is starting, the ball is rolling slowly, but I think people are starting to realize it. We need to. I've even seen, like, hand over the baton kind of like memes or whatever, hashtags and things like that. But the point being, kind of, lend your focus or pass the focus over to someone else, making sure those people are heard. So.
Nice, thank you. Catherine?
So I guess being poets and kind of like inherently, like, we're calling stuff out. Like, if like someone looked at me the wrong way, like, I'm writing a poem about it and I'm gonna let like a room full of strangers know. And that's kind of like the theme for spoken word. So I think we're really good at like calling people out, and we have like a lot of pain that we're expressing, and it becomes like this, therapeutic environment. But what I do think could be a lot better is like how we call people in. So like being those
Nice.
like kind of misfits, we have some pain going on. Like we don't always know how to like interact and socialize, and there's the awkwardness. And so like being able to like, like pull a poet to this, like sometimes it's like there's drama between poets, and like instead of just talking to the poet, someone will make a poem about it and present it, and they'll be like, oh, we know who they're talking about. So like being able to be like, hey, like when you said that thing, like it really hurt me, or like, I wonder how like this population feels about like some of the things that you're doing. And I mean, there have been spaces like where people have been like abusive to others in the community, and they've been like, called out or called in and like kind of like removed from the community to make it safe. But I do think I know that everybody doesn't have the capacity for it, and I also know that like it's not ever our responsibility to have that labor of like, teaching people or helping people. But as an educator, there are times when I do have that in me, and it's maybe some other people do. So I think we could do a better job of like, instead of writing a poem or like getting up in someone's face, like just like hand holding a little bit, or just being like, listen, when you did this, like it wasn't cool.
Yeah.
And I think again, it almost brings back to like that level of capacity that each of us sometimes has. And again, the self-care of like, is it in me today? Do I want to take up this conversation? Or, like Patrick was saying, like, nope, today's the day that I'm going to pray and meditate, and I'm going to keep on walking because I will never see this person again. At those days, the checkout line where I'm like, nope, I'm going home. And so, it really just kind of depends. Again, each of us with our own experiences. So that being said, I would love to hear some closing thoughts. Brandon, if you want to go first.
I think, like we said, making sure that people are listening. It's easy to get caught in our own bubble or kind of stay within our own thoughts, and this is definitely the time, while everything else is being shaken up, to really be open to what the world can be and what we all can do, because we all have something that we can contribute. What we all can do to be anti-racists and to really better the world. So that'd be my thought.
Awesome, thank you, Catherine.
Can I close on a poem?
Sure.
Yes, I'm ready.
Cool. Yeah. I mean, I mostly write about healthy relationships and like, stuff, but like my poetry really like does document like a journey of like healing for me. And so this was a poem I recently wrote just about like healing and stuff. So I'll just read that as my closing. Okay. How I know I'm healing. I no longer resonate with Jessica Salgado, the sad poems and the hopeless romantics of losing myself to empty men. I don't go to parties in search of a happily ever after as much as I do a good old time. I'm on step 9, and I've since then cut off all my soul ties with people who never really gave a damn about me. I forgave my brother for the years of stealing, jewelry, credit cards, and trust in men. I reconciled with my cousins for their explicit teachings that a woman's worth has less to do with who she is and is more so about how much she gives. When I go out, I look cute, not to be seen by hungry people looking to bury their wanton bones in my self-made castle as much as to be desired by my own damn self. When you call, I don't pick up. Even if it's for the second time in a row, a special persistence that makes me feel wanted. I deleted your number. Finally, once and for all, I gave up hope that a guy who lied to me so many times before had anything more credible to say. I stopped believing in your potential and started developing my own. I stopped focusing on what was wrong in other people's lives and started focusing on mine. I stick it out in a 12-step group, not because I like it, but because I have to, because it continues to be the only thing that keeps me sober.
Yes.
I started believing in God. Not the God I grew up on, someone, something I can see my reflection in, something that gives me a reason for being here, a force that makes me feel honored and special. I still feel jealous when I see couples, but my knee-jerk reaction is not to call up someone who would in turn desire all of me, offering nothing in return, who believes their very presence is a present even though they're not present at all. Instead, I call up a friend. I can identify available and unavailable people when I see them, like the cute girl at the poetry reading who catches my eye. But I know when I'm more interested in using than being of use, and I've done enough work to know I could hurt people too, so I keep it moving. When my mom becomes enraged that I am in fact just like her, some tainted reflection she has not yet grappled within herself, I do not snap. I do not react, I respond, I listen, I walk on. My poetry has evolved just like me. No longer do I sip on infatuous love tales gone sour. I think little of people who think little of me. I think more about what I deserve. I go to therapy like it's motherfucking church. It is my salvation. I will get baptized in my therapist's vision for my life if I have to. I have a vision for my life because I have to, and it has never been clearer. Thank you.
Hallelujah.
Drop the mic.
My God.
Wow.
Okay.
Wow.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Whew. Yes. Oh man, I don't know if I can follow that up, and that's all right. Because I love that. I love that gift. Thank you so much, Catherine.
You're welcome.
My final thought is this. I was offered this insight by my spiritual leader as I was going through my own process of recovery, and he gave me these 3 words: react, respond, relate. Those are the ways we connect to people. When we first start, we can react, right? Who are you talking to? Oh, no, you didn't. Oh, I love him. I want to be with him, right? We can do that. Then we elevate, we grow, we evolve. We start to respond. We think first for a second, and then we speak. And then the final step is to relate. I talked about grace earlier, extending that grace. That's how we're going to come together. I know the bigot screaming at me is communicating to me from a learned perception. And before I come back at him, I have to give him grace. Now, I may still correct him. And we may still have a heated debate, but there is no need for me to go to that level. So I challenge everyone. And I know we are in the season. We got 26 days, y'all. I get it. Relate. That is the goal, for us to relate. And that's it. Drink your water, stay black, stay brown, and mind your business.
Woohoo! Can I take a picture of us?
Yeah. Sure.
Oh, please.
Okay, ready?
Debbie, you got to smile too.
Oh, sorry. Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well,
Remember
thank
this
you
moment
all.
forever.
Yes, thank you all so much. It has genuinely been such a pleasure to converse with you, to hear about your experiences, and just thank you so much for sharing all that with us.
Thank you.
And thank you, Debbie.
Yes, thank you, Debbie.
Most definitely. Thank you, Debbie, for making sure that we are being as inclusive and accessible as possible. So with that being said, just simply wanted to do another shout out and saying thank you to Orlando Gay Chorus, to Central Florida's Sounds of Freedom Band and Color Guard, to Q Latinx, to Bros in Convo Initiative for putting this event together, and then also for Trulieve and Watermark and Come Out with Pride. And thank you so much to our audience for listening to this panel and taking the time to hear these voices. And without a doubt, be sure Saturday, Pride is not canceled. We are still doing Pride in the streets and Pride in the house. We've got an entire day full of programming. Please be sure to go to comeoutwithpride.com to check out all the details, check out the route for Pride in the Streets, learn about, all the artists that we've got going on Saturday night. And, like I said, we've got a programming afternoon with, Kids Fringe and a pre-party. So it's going to be a great time. And finally, together we stand and we support our community, have fun, be safe, and happy Pride, Orlando.
Woo! Happy Pride.